Tonight on Reporting Scotland, Holyrood passes new laws to pardon those convicted under historic legislation which criminalised consenting sex between men.
Those who were convicted of offences for engaging in same-sex sexual activity have done nothing wrong.
Also on the programme, plans to reduce 6 monthly dental checkups to 12. Dentists raise their concerns with the Chief Dental Officer. Why is Microsoft sinking its servers off the coast of Orkney? We reveal who is more optimistic about their country's future, the Scots or the English.
Do you actually think you can get Scotland to the World Cup?
Yeah, I think I have a great chance.
And as World Cup fever mounts, we look back 40 years to the hopes and dreams of what could have been at Argentina 78. Good evening. Pardons for gay and bisexual men with historic convictions for sexual activity that is no longer illegal have been unanimously approved at Holyrood. The new law will also allow those affected to request their convictions are erased from public records. The change will affect a relatively small number of men, but gay rights campaigners believe it's a hugely symbolic move. Here's our political correspondent, Glenn Campbell.
Gay men no longer need to be secretive about their sexuality. The laws against sexual activity between consenting men are gone, but discrimination remains. One man fined for loitering in a public loo told MSPs in private evidence he feared his conviction might still show up in a disclosure check decades on. Under the new law, he could apply to have it deleted. In November, the First Minister also promised pardons and said sorry for past laws.
And for the hurt and the harm that they caused to so many.
It was an emotional watch for the Duffys from Erskine. And today, Nick Duffy explained why.
It's so good to know that somebody has bothered to do something about it. First Minister made a promise, she's kept a promise, and society will change just because they apologise, let alone the legislation and everything else.
And why does that mean so much to you?
Because I've had a sense of being oppressed for the majority of my life. Because I've known that I daren't hold somebody's hand, to give somebody, another man, a hug, to express my feelings was always going to be dangerous.
It's estimated that gay sexual activity led to around 4,000 convictions in Scotland from 1930 onwards. Of those men due a pardon, it's thought a number in the low hundreds are still alive. But the Scottish Government expects as few as 25 disregard applications for convictions to be removed from public records. At Holyrood, the Government said a change in the law was overdue.
Those who were convicted of offences for engaging in same-sex sexual activity have done nothing wrong.
John Mason.
One MSP raised a faith-based concern.
People of many traditional faiths and for other reasons believe that it is wrong for one person of the same sex to have a sexual relationship with someone else.
But the Green leader suggested those opposed to same-sex relationships should not be allowed to become MSPs.
It's time, I believe, for a little less patience, both with those who oppose equality in their actions and with those who nod along with the consensus when their actions are on the record, but then happily tell the bigots exactly what they want to hear when they think there's nobody watching.
When it came to the vote, Parliament's decision was clear.
Yes, 119.
The bill passed unanimously. Gay and bisexual men, living or dead, will now be pardoned automatically for historic sexual activity with other men that is no longer against the law. Glenn Campbell, Reporting Scotland.
Dentists have been meeting the Chief Dental Officer over their concerns about plans to cut the number of checkups. Labour believes a reduction in 6 monthly checkups is privatisation by stealth. But the Scottish Government says annual checkups are fine for many, while others could end up seeing their dentists more often. Here's our political correspondent, Andrew Kerr.
It's the noise we all love to hate, but now it's dentists with the ache. They've been meeting the Chief Dental Officer to talk about changes to the service, which could result in fewer appointments, with patients moving away from 6 monthly checkups.
Oral cancer is on the increase in Scotland, and the more often we see patients, the more likely we're to pick that up. So we feel it's important that patients are seen more regularly, and it may get to the stage where patients pay themselves to come in and have their routine examinations and scale and polishes done.
The National Institute for Health and Care Excellence says dental checks for healthy patients could take place at most every 2 years. The Scottish Government says 6 monthly checks, regardless of oral health, are not supported by clinical evidence. Under a new system, each patient will have their own treatment plan, resulting in fewer checkups for healthy patients. Labour say it's privatisation by stealth. Their health spokesman's a former dentist.
I think the risk would be if people are told that they can't have their 6 monthly checkup, that they may then instead be offered private services or private regimes, and I think that would be an unfortunate step.
In the capital, mixed views about proposed changes.
That'd be ridiculous. Well, you need to have checkups every 6 months in order to just keep your teeth healthy.
I don't think that would be a very good idea. I think dental health is really important.
I haven't been to my dentist for a couple of years, and I know that it's sneaking up on me, so yes, I definitely think it's important, but whether or not that's going to change the practicality of people's practice, I don't know.
I don't know. I missed my last checkup, so it wouldn't affect me too much, I guess.
Here at St Andrew's House, the headquarters of the Scottish Government, the Chief Dental Officer is moving to reassure any dentists and patients about any possible changes.
If patients are used to coming every 6 months, to expect them to want to come every 2 years is not realistic. And at the moment, quite a lot of patients come yearly, and that's fine. And the patients who are not at risk and who know how to look after their mouth and who have got a healthy diet, that may well be fine.
Discussions continue. Patients will have to wait to see how often they're in the dentist's chair. Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
The Prime Minister has asked the Home Office to look into the case of a boy living in Glasgow who faces being deported to Georgia after being left an orphan. Georgia Kakava moved to Scotland with his mother Sophie when his father was killed by Georgian criminals. She died in February after an illness. Georgie's grandmother, who lives with him in Springburn, is fighting for him to be given asylum. His local MP, Paul Sweeney, raised the issue with Theresa May at Prime Minister's Questions this afternoon.
He has lived in Glasgow since he was 3 years old. His only language is English, and he speaks it with the same accent as I do. Yet he now faces being deported to Georgia, his late mother's country of birth, becoming another statistic that suffers at the hands of this Prime Minister's hostile environment policy. Will the Prime Minister promise today that Georgie will not, under any circumstances, be torn from his school friends in Glasgow?
The gentleman has raised a very specific individual case. It is right that that individual case be looked at properly, and that is what I will ask the Home Office to do.
A bottle and can deposit return scheme could be implemented here. The Scottish Government is to launch a consultation on an initiative which would mean people paying a deposit when they buy drinks, bottles and cans in a bid to boost recycling and cut waste. The deposit increases prices, but you get the money back if you returned the container. Glasgow City Council has defended its decision to accept a Rolls-Royce worth around £150,000 from an anonymous benefactor. Opposition politicians have criticised the running costs of the car and the lack of transparency about who paid for it. A council spokesperson said its engine category was the strictest standard when it was produced, and there was no conflict of interest regarding the benefactor. There are growing concerns tonight that Scotch whisky could be caught up in a transatlantic trade war between Europe and the United States. Scottish Conservative MPs have written to the European Commission wanting bourbon taken off a potential hit list because they fear America could retaliate against Scotch whisky. Well, our Westminster correspondent David Porter is here. David, tell us some more about this.
Jackie, this is a very good example of something that happens in the Rust Belt states of the United States. Places like Pittsburgh and Michigan could potentially have knock-on effects thousands of miles away in rural Scotland. It all concerns a threat by President Trump to impose import tariffs on steel and aluminium to try and protect the industry in the United States. In response, the European Union has drawn up a list of more than 50 American products that it says it could put extra taxes on if President Trump goes ahead with his threat. Now, those 50 include American whiskey or bourbon. That in turn has raised alarm bells in Scotland. The fear is that if bourbon was to face extra taxes, then the United States may retaliate in a tit-for-tat action, may actually decide that it would put higher taxes on Scotch whisky. That's why Conservative MPs here at Westminster, Scottish Conservative MPs, have tonight written to the European Commission asking them to take American whisky or bourbon off that threatened list.
And remind us, David, just how much is at stake here?
No pun intended, it is no small beer, this one. The United States is the largest export market for Scotch whisky, in the region of the best part of £1 billion of sales there in the last year. The Scotch whisky industry employs either directly or indirectly up to about 40,000 people, 7,000 of them in rural locations. So it is a big business for Scotland and the UK. The Scotch Whisky Association also pays a lot of taxes to the UK Exchequer. That is why there is so much concern at the potential way this could go.
Thank you very much, David. Have you ever wondered where all that data we use online, things like photos and music, is stored? Well, the answer is in massive computers in vast warehouses, which in turn use a lot of energy to run. Well, now researchers think they've found a more sustainable way of storing our data, and it involves sinking it off the coast of Orkney. Our technology correspondent Rory Kettlin-Jones has been to see how it works.
Ever uploaded a photo, updated your Facebook status, or maybe streamed some music? If so, you've probably used a data centre where vast amounts of our personal information are now stored. But what if you could put all of that underwater? Up in Orkney, the tech giant Microsoft is trying to do just that. This white cylinder is packed with computers. It was assembled in France and then brought here to be sunk. We're on our way across Scapa Flow to the deployment site. But I've one nagging question. Why sink a data centre?
It's easier to cool data centers in water than on land, and that means we use a lot less power to cool the data center than we otherwise would. It is kind of a crazy experiment, but that's why we do research, is to try these things that sort of push us to new places. And if this is successful, maybe we'll have the ability to deploy data centers anywhere in the world very rapidly, perhaps as little as 90 days.
This is the exact point where the data centre is going to be sunk, and on the ocean floor is a cable bringing power to it and then taking its data ashore and connecting it to the wider internet. A day on, with conditions in this sometimes rough stretch of sea very calm, the painstaking operation to put the data centre on the ocean floor is underway. Orkney was chosen partly because it's a centre for pioneering renewable energy research, generating electricity from wind and wave power.
Orkney's produced over 120% of its electricity needs from renewables every year since 2012. So this is a place that's basically running on renewables. And so bringing a project like this to Orkney makes sense because it will be basically being powered by renewables.
It's a go now. Thank you.
The data centre is heading ever so slowly to the bottom of the ocean. At the control room on shore, they're getting ready to power it up.
Switch it on for you if you're happy. Over.
Now Microsoft will monitor it for up to 5 years. This could prove to be the future of data storage, or maybe just a tourist attraction for the fish. Rory Kettlin-Jones, BBC News, Orkney.
It's 17 minutes to 7. A reminder now of tonight's main story. Holyrood passes new laws to pardon those convicted under historic legislation which criminalised consenting sex between men. And still to come.
You can get Scotland to the World Cup.
40 years since Ali MacLeod's Scotland were going to shake them up by winning the World Cup, but didn't. Now, who do you think is more upbeat about the future, the Scots or the English? Well, according to a poll commissioned by the BBC, it's Well, I'll let our political editor, Brian Taylor, tell you more.
Where better to look at Scottish identity than historic Linlithgow, birthplace of Mary Queen of Scots and Alex Salmond. This area, West Lothian, exactly matched Scotland's voting pattern in the independence referendum. How do people here describe themselves?
Scots.
Scottish and British. Scottish first and then British or UK.
So, our core identity? Scottish, mingled for many with British. No surprise, every poll indicates that. But how strongly do people in Scotland identify as European? 12% said very strongly. 19% replied fairly strongly. 25% said not very strongly, while 42% felt not at all European. Here are the figures for England. 9% very strongly European, 17% fairly strongly, 24% not very strongly, and 47% not at all European.
So Scotland seems a bit more inclined to stress European identity, but only a bit. Remember that Scotland voted decisively in favour of remaining in the European Union. Perhaps, though, that reflected wider factors such as aligning with the SNP position or taking a global outlook, rather than evidence of active zeal for Europe in particular.
Look to the future. Will Scotland improve for these youngsters? This is St Michael's Kirk in Linlithgow, a group for toddlers, parents and grandparents. Some glance ahead and fret.
I've had good times and the future is good because I have my pension, but for my grandchildren that's an unknown.
I'm not one for looking at the past anyway, so there's no point in thinking about how it was. I want to look to the future.
Most seem upbeat.
I think Scotland's a good place and it's only getting better and better as we progress.
I feel it's going to be a really good place to raise children because it feels very optimistic just now. There's a very good progressive social agenda.
And some are determined to stay positive.
There's hope for the future. I guess I have fears about some things that we might have left them a difficult legacy. You always got to have a bit of hope. This one's called Hope.
Those views tend to match our Scottish poll. 29% reckoned Scotland was better in the past, while 8% put Scotland at its best right now. But 36% felt the best years are in the future. By contrast, 49% of England, nearly half, felt the nation was better in the past. 5% put England at its best right now, and just 17% saw the best years in the future. The rest in both cases were unsure.
There is clearly a sense south of the border that some way or another, Britain is not as great as it was, England is not as great as it was, it is a declining power. That's partly, therefore, the mood that helped to underlie the Leave vote south of the border, in a sense trying to regain England and Britain's sovereignty and the notion of being a global player again, the idea of global Britain. That isn't a mood that you feel, in any sense, clearly replicated north of the border.
And it seems Scotland's relative optimism can even shrug off sporting reverses.
Finally, the pollsters asked Scots who they would be supporting in the Football World Cup. A few said England. A few more said anybody playing England. Roughly a quarter said they weren't supporting any particular team. And fully half the nation said they just weren't interested in the World Cup at all. Come on, Scotland, give us a break. Qualify next time, eh?
And we will be dealing with that a bit later in the programme. But let's go to Brian now, who's at Holyrood. Brian, what do you think lies behind these differing levels of optimism?
Jackie, I think it's partly about Scotland. It's about a relatively settled Scottish identity, albeit mingled for many with British. It's about a civic nationalism, outward looking and perhaps predicated upon a confidence offer, but it's also very largely about England. For decades, for generations, English identity, it seemed to me, was unthinking, it was unquestioned, it was conflated with Britishness, it was conflated perhaps with empire. But I think in recent years the good and sensible people of England have seemed to me slightly puzzled about their status and about their identity. I think there's three factors to that. First of all, it's post-devolution. They wonder what the Scots are up to. They wonder where the Union is going. It's very largely about migration, but it's also very largely indeed about the European Union. In that context, you can see the Leave vote in England as being in some ways a reassertion of Englishness, a reassertion of an attempt to establish the status of what it means to be English.
Brian, thank you. Now, 3,548 shows involving artists as diverse as Jason Donovan and Pussy Riot. It has to be the Edinburgh Fringe. The programme, launched today, is the largest to date. Our arts correspondent Pauline McLean can tell us more.
From Jason Donovan to a stage show featuring past presenters of Blue Peter, anything goes at the Edinburgh Fringe. This year's programme, launched today, features more than 3,500 shows, the biggest to date. But has the festival reached tipping point?
This street here, the Royal Mile, is obviously a tourist attraction in its own right, and during that part of the year it can get pretty crowded. Some cities that have almost, a critical mass, but no, I think that's been sort of exaggerated a bit.
The Fringe Society says the festival offers solutions to the congestion, ticket collection points away from the busiest areas, and a push for cheaper accommodation.
You have some 50,000 artists descending on this city who want to perform, who want to showcase their work, who want to be creative in this place in Edinburgh. It could only happen here, but we're in danger of jeopardising that in the future if we allow accommodation costs to become an increasing barrier to people being able to participate.
But they can't do it alone. The Fringe Society has just 24 members of staff, and they're appealing for support to keep the world's largest arts festival at the top of its game. Pauline McLean, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
The new chief executive of the Scottish Football Association says he'll speak to the Rangers chairman, Dave King, to address any concerns he has about the governing body's dealings with the club. Ian Maxwell attended his first SFA annual general meeting today and said the relationship with Rangers was fine, although he intends to seek talks with Mr King, who had called for an SFA director to be suspended.
Yeah, I will speak to him. I mean, I'll speak to all the clubs. I think that's, a big part of the job is being out and getting to know all the members, whether it's, at one end of the club size spectrum or down at the bottom. It's important that I'm out and speaking to them all.
Now, as promised, the World Cup. 40 years ago this month, Scotland had a dream that we could win the World Cup. Led by their irrepressible manager, Ali MacLeod, and passionately backed by the Tartan Army, the Scotland squad went to Argentina, and we all believed that dreams could come true. And then, here's Rona MacLeod.
In 1978, the nation had a dream, and thousands set off with the hope of seeing Scotland win the World Cup.
One Glasgow butcher is even selling his shop just to go to Argentina. Be well worth it.
No money. Colin left his job. I sold my motorbike.
Planning was done in a pub in Edinburgh. The Daily Telegraph map of South America, that was it. That was their travel guide.
Flew into Port of Spain, Trinidad.
Which we thought was in South America.
Of course, it's in the Caribbean.
The fans were driven by the belief of the man leading the team, Ali MacLeod.
I think a medal of some sort will come, and I pray and hope that it's the gold one.
MacLeod's family remember the man as well as the manager.
He was optimistic. He never looked on the negative side of anything. He was just that type of person.
I don't know, he seemed to bring out the best in people, really. That's all I can say. He did. Most people took to him.
You haven't bothered in your preparation to go to see Iran, Peru and Holland?
Well, basically, what I've decided to do is to try and win the World Cup by preparing my own team to perfection.
But when the competition began, the dreams came crashing down against Peru and Iran.
Absolute total disaster.
Even an heroic 3-2 win over Holland was not enough to save the campaign.
Scotland are out of the World Cup.
When the bus is leaving and he just looks so unhappy, he really does. And that's it. I thought, what can you do? What can you do?
Today, only 100 fans stood on the concourse at Glasgow Airport for the team's homecoming.
You could see when he came back, he was a changed man. He just He'd lost his sparkle.
For a while.
For a while, he'd lost his sparkle.
And so Scotland's love story ended. For many, there were broken hearts and dreams of what might have been. Rona McLeod, reporting Scotland.
And you can see Scotland 78, A Love Story, at 9 o'clock tonight on BBC One Scotland. Well, let's get the weather now from Christopher.
Jackie, thank you. Hello there, good evening to you. Well, another sunny day for many of us. Some lovely pictures once again from our weather watchers. This the scene in Fife earlier, this Clashnessie in Assynt in Sutherland. The thing that combines them both is the fact that it's so dry, and it's remaining dry. But why? Well, we need to look to the jet stream, this fast-moving ribbon of wind way up in the atmosphere, really in quite a northerly position, allowing high pressure to sit overhead. And we're on the warm side of the jets, the temperature's above average for the time of year. Tonight, once again, it's dry. There'll be some cloud around coastal parts of the country, but inland clear skies. Town and city temperatures around 7 to 11 Celsius, cooler than that in the countryside, and winds light. So to tomorrow, and high pressure is with us, meaning another dry and settled day. Just a small chance of 1 or 2 showers through the Central Highlands, but they will be isolated. So first thing tomorrow, some early sunshine for central parts. Again, some cloud affecting the southeast coast up towards the Northern Isles and through the Hebrides, but that will tend to thin and break. There's the chance of 1 or 2 sharp showers, perhaps through the Central and Southern Highlands, but they will be isolated. For most, it's dry again. In the west, temperatures in the low 20s, further east into the high teens, and a cool feel around some North Sea coast with that breeze. Then for Friday, high pressure with us once again, and the small chance of 1 or 2 sharp showers through the Central Highlands, but for most another dry day. Probably cloudier on Friday compared with today and tomorrow, but the cloud will thin and break. The best of the sunshine coming through in the west. In the east at times that cloud just a wee bit stubborn. Temperatures in the sunshine up to 20 Celsius, and again the small chance of 1 or 2 sharp showers. And then looking ahead towards the weekend, on the face of it, it looks fairly straightforward. But this low pressure in the Bay of Biscay just sort of discards this bit of rain moving north through the North Sea. And that gives some question marks for Sunday. But here's Saturday first. Largely dry again, some spells of sunshine, a bit of cloud, a few showers through the Highlands and Islands. Temperatures in the sun, 20 degrees. Here's Sunday, largely dry, a few showers. There's that showery rain moving its way northwards. And both the European weather model and the American weather model has it there. This is the UK Met Office model. It's got it a lot further west, but this is the outlier. Probably only a 30% chance of that happening. So if you're waiting for rain, I'm afraid the wait continues. It looks like it's going to stay dry. That's the forecast for now.
Thank you, Christopher. And that's Reporting Scotland. I'm back at 10:30. Until then, from everyone on the team, enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye.